Welcome, my name is Colleen Tauke and I'm the Sewing Specialist at Fons Porter. In this video tutorial, we will talk about the quilt called Fire and Ice. For the pattern for this quilt, visit our website. Okay, today this is a Bargello quilt, as you can see behind me. It's a very striking quilt with color changes, with blacks, then into whites and greens, and then all of a sudden a pop of red and a little pink, and it makes this wonderful curve of color. So let's see if we can figure out how to do that. What we do is start with 2.5 inch strips. So we've got a collection of strips and you're going to be making large strip sets. So you would want to start with pairs of 2s and then 4s and work your way up. I've kept a recording of the sequence of the fabrics that I'm using so that I would remember which was 1, which was 2, which was 3. If you're making your own, you'll have to create your own step of numbers. But here is just a half widths because we don't have quite enough space here for full width of fabric. But you can see that I've numbered them down one side and all 20 fabrics into one strip set. Again, when you're working with strip sets, remember to go one direction, then come back the alternate direction, so that your strip set doesn't get a definite diagonal twist to it. And I know this because I've done it before. So make sure that you alternate your directions when you're stitching, press as you go so you create a nice crisp strip set like this. What you need to do then, you're going to be creating 4 tubes of strip sets. 2 of them, you're going to press all the seam allowances, we're called the odd. We're going to press them towards the 1. 1's an odd number, so we'll press all the seam allowances up towards the number 1. On 2 of the other tubes, you're going to press all the seam allowances, we're calling it the even tube, and you're going to press everything towards the number 20. So all the seam allowances would go in the opposite direction. The reason for the 2 different pressing tubes is because we're going to create alternating seams back and forth, so everything will lock up and it will be really easy to assemble in the end. So you're going to want to have 2 tubes labeled even, 2 tubes labeled odd. And when you get done, you're going to be actually stitching this large strip set together, matching the seam allowances there, and you would create a tube. And you can see even mine got a little bit of a twist in it, even going back and forth. So don't worry about that. But create a tube, which I've got one here ready to go, already stitched into a loop. The last seam is along the top. You can see my numbers, if I turn it so you can actually read, my numbers are along this side here. Now when I went to make my first cut when I was working on this, to show you how to make it, I thought if I kept that little strip, and I'll show you, I did keep my first cut off just so I would know which fabrics in which order. I wouldn't have to go back to a chart. That will be a reference for later when we have to open up a seam. And that'll become evident in a second. We're going to lay this on the cutting surface, and we're going to have to use a large or a long ruler at this point. We're going to clean up that edge, taking off the salvages. And we don't want to waste too much fabric, so we're just going to go in just far enough so that we hit all of our, take all of the salvage edges off. Make a nice cut all the way along, and remove that. Now we've got a nice squared up end, and we're going to rotate that. In the instructions for this quilt, there is a chart that will tell you what width to cut off of each of the loops. So follow that cutting instruction to the letter. So if you want to create a quilt that looks like this, you need to have the exact increments. So the first increment, because there's so many, the first increment is a 7-inch cut, then a 5.5 and a 4 1/4. So one at a time. It might even be helpful to take a pen and make sure we mark off each of them as we cut them so we don't confuse anything. Once you've taken off a cut, and I'll do the first one, we'll make the first cut, which is, or one of them is, let's see, I can do a 4 1/4 off here just so you can see. I cut all the way across, line up on the 4 1/4. Work my way all the way across, or across the block. And then we're going to have this loop. Now a loop doesn't quite fit into a quilt now, does it? So we go back to the reference on our chart, and it tells us between which two fabrics we need to remove a seam. On this one, it would tell me that I need to remove the seam between the number 20 and the number 1. My cheat sheet, that if this is fabric number 1 and this is fabric number 20, it's between two of the dark black prints. See now how that comes in useful? That way I know which seam to remove. I would go in, find the two black background floral, and remove that seam there. And then I'm going to show you how to arrange them. You're going to work your way through all of the cutting charts in your pattern, and you will have lengths that look like this as you open them up between the appropriate fabrics. This is a point at where it wouldn't be nice if you have a design wall in your sewing space, or the living room floor or the family room floor works great. And you're going to need to label them to keep them straight. Like I did here, I put in, this is segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. Do remember the odd and even loops have to correspond to your segment cuts so that your opposing seams, the odd segments 1 and 3 would come off of your odd numbered loop, 2 and 4 would come off of your even pressed loop. And you can see how the colors start to make a motion through the quilt. Because you've got those opposing seams, as you join these together, everything's going to lock up really nicely. Now you're saying, the quilt stops here. It's because in your diagram for this pattern, you'll notice you're creating 1/2 of the quilt at a time. So the top piece across to about here, or right in here, is one piece. Then you're going to go back to that second set of loops, cut your corresponding pieces again, and start again. And then you'll join the two large pieces together. One tip that we do want to stress is that when you're joining pieces together and dragging this piece through the sewing machine a lot, is to come in here and do a stay stitch about 1/4 inch away from that cut edge, because you're not joining anything to the left side of the quilt. You're going to keep adding pieces here, and this is going to get a lot of abuse otherwise. So we want to stay stitch along that border of the quilt. For more of our videos, visit our website. Thanks for joining me today.